Welcome to round 2 with Breaking Goryos. Lucky to be on the play. This hand is way too slow and just immediately gone. This hand, good. We have turn 2 Breaking Entering. That's probably enough. Plus we have interaction. I don't really know what else I could really ask for. This hand is just perfectly good, and I would take this 6. That's just delightful. I would take this 6 against anything, really. So my opponent suspends a Ancestral Vision, which really does nothing, and then I give them some business. I fetched Mountain over Island. I'm not really sure why, but... So I hit a Griselbrand, which is sadly not as good as hitting an Emrakul, but I will take it and put my opponent to 9 with a 2-point burn spell in my hand. And there's no need to draw 7 now. I'm not using them. I'd rather just have them in my hand and not have to discard them. If I didn't have a second Griselbrand in my graveyard to Goryo's, I probably would have drawn 7 with the intent of finding another and discarding it. But here I can make that decision later. So draw my 7, got some stuff, and I was trying to find a Spirit Guide here so that I could effectively Brutality the last 2 damage to my opponent's at 9. This is another 7. They're at 2, and then they die. I was trying to find a Spirit Guide so I could Brutality through a Spell Pierce, and I realized I made a mistake, which was once I drew a second set of cards, there was an Emrakul in them. Was that in the last set of cards? Last set of cards. Here we go. Here I make the mistake. Once I have the Emrakul, that's where. So what I'm actually supposed to do is I'm supposed to cast Collective Brutality, discarding the Emrakul to drain, and so I'm supposed to play a land, Play a... There's another orchard somewhere in this mess, right? Here we go. So I have this other orchard. Play this. I don't want to play the other lands because I guess I could fetch Swamp. Leaves me at 4 too. Just anything that isn't an untapped dual land that would put me to dead, to bolt. So I'm supposed to do that, use those 2 mana, leave up a black source. Brutality discarding Emrakul, and then Goryo's the Emrakul. The Brutality being escalated as discard drain. And the end result of that is either I have an Emrakul attacking, or my opponent loses 2 life and dies to this. As it stands, I could have lost to a Path to Exile, but I kind of put my opponent on like a blue-red deck. But they don't have the path, they don't have the counter, and my opponent just dies a horrible death to the old 2-mana drain 2. Okay, so sideboarding. I took out some Through the Breaches. They're a little slow-ish. I don't know if that's 100% right in retrospect. I think that I probably wanted to leave those in against counter magic because of the EOT breach potential. It's possible I should have shaved down on Kari Zevs. But I took out Cathartic Reunions because they're counterspell vulnerable. I took out a Looting because I actually care about card quantity in this matchup. I took out a Brutality just for the interaction power level upgrade and it's not overload on it. Some of this discard potential is being replaced by Thoughtseize targeting myself, which is also interaction. Dispel again, interaction against counterspells, and then I have Painful Truths to kind of tie it together and brute force through all of the interaction I expect my opponent to be representing. So this hand was a pretty clear keep to me. It's not an insane hand, but it's pretty close to an insane hand, and I have a Looting to kind of get anywhere, really. So here, I opt to lead on Thoughtseize. I'm taking the damage up front rather than doing this. I think this is going to add up to more damage over the course of this game, really. This is, I'm Thoughtseizing first because I think the information from that informs how I want to Faithless Looting. You know, my opponent might have a Surgical Extraction I don't want to expose my stuff to or whatever. And it looks like they are just pure Jeskai control. And I opt to take Dispel. I think... So in retrospect, the options were actually, like, obviously not taking Rev, it doesn't do anything. Didn't really want to take Cryptic because it takes too long to do something. I think I should have taken Path because I might be attacking with a Griselbrand. And I realized afterwards, I'm used to Dispel being just crushingly good against Goryos. But the Karizev breaking entering line just doesn't interact at all with Dispel. It's just like Dispel the sorcery or the sorcery or the sorcery. There's just nothing going on there. So I think I should have taken Path or Cryptic potentially. Um, but I was kind of locked into old Goryo's lines. And it's also really sweet that because the way this resolves, I realized this after Thought Seizing, you put 8 into your graveyard and then immediately reanimate. There's no way to surgical around that. So like a lot of the common interaction that was super scary for old Goryo's decks, just ignored by this new plan. And here I can put the Griselbrand into my graveyard, and we can actually plan on just entering the Griselbrand the old-fashioned way, which is you just cast it for 6 mana. Discard one of the excess lands, whatever. Didn't hit the Goryo, so just full on not draw my opponent there. And that's reasonably lucky. And here, so I realized after the fact that paying the extra life was pretty bad. I didn't have to do that. My life total is probably going to matter because they're going to path my Griselbrand, and I'm going to want to draw cards, so that's not great. So I get in this attack, get my Griselbrand path, draw 7. Just kind of hope I don't die to like a Bolt or something. Which I'm not immediately dead to Bolt, but pretty lucky to draw through the breach. And my opponent does nothing on their turn, and as Magic Online skips through everything, what ends up happening this turn is I end up setting up such that I can cast my through the breach. I don't know how all of my cards ended up in the graveyard there, but great moto. I set up so that I can cast the through the breach, and I do so with a blue mana untapped. And my opponent had 4 lands, a spirit, and a snapcaster. I get to do so with my 2 spirit guides I exiled. And the result of that is I was able to not give them a 7th permanent and attack them with Emrakul so that they can't keep a land. And then after combat, I give them a... they didn't have a counter spell, so I didn't have to use the Dispel I was leaving a blue up. I tapped these 3. Don't have to use that, and then after combat, I'm given the opportunity with my opponent with no lands to Collective Brutality, make them lose a life. I guess technically the Brutality could have lost me the game if my opponent had like... So they had revved in response to go to 1. Technically I could have lost if my opponent had like Disrupting Shoal, blue 2-drop as their like exact 2 unknown cards. But at the same time, if they just have Lightning Bolt and a land as their 2 unknown cards, which is much more likely, I just die. So I kind of had to go for it. So fortunately, I was able to kind of reconstruct what was going on there through delightful turbo replays, and I'm glad that it didn't totally crash out there, which happens on occasion. But yeah, this deck seemed pretty powerful, and I seemed reasonably able. Like I had so much interaction at the end of that game. I had Thoughtseize, Collective Brutality, Dispel, just all these cards that let me power through any potential counter magic or interaction my opponent could have. And having that layering was really sweet. Collective Brutality, I don't think people have really explored the standard Goryo's decks too much since Eldritch Moon, but that card really kicked the power level of the like traditional Emrakul lists up a notch.